Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Omar, Khalid. But today is the 9th of March 2023 and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail in the course of the show. Both our main stories concern Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab and his meetings abroad. Now, as we know that the first of our stories concerns the Afghan women and how they have been treated by the Afghan Taliban interim government and how that has been highlighted by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab. Recently, when he was in New York, he has said that the Afghanistan's Taliban ruler have deeply disappointed Muslims across the globe by imposing restrictions on women's rights, on education and work. He was addressing the first ever United Nations backed conference on women in Islam. This is going to be our first segment. Women in Islam, women in Afghanistan, what's the way forward? Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab as well and what he has said. He has highlighted the cause of Palestine and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. He has stressed the need for establishing a monitoring mechanism for crimes against women and girls in territories under foreign occupation, including the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. He was, of course, addressing the high-level debate at the UN Security Council in New York on women, peace and security towards the 25th anniversary of the resolution 1325. This is going to be our second story. Then we will be talking about Prince Fahad bin Mansour Al Saud of Saudi Arabia, who has formally launched the Saudi-Pakistan Tech House in Pakistan with an aim to create more than 1,000 jobs at a total project value of $100 million in the IT sector over the next 5 years. This is extremely good news, especially for the IT sector in Pakistan, which is extremely competent. And finally, plastics. We all know the havoc that they have been creating across the world and in our country as well, and that is why there has been some legislation regarding that. Now, plastics are entering the world's oceans and have surged by an unprecedented amount since the year 2005 and could nearly triple by the year 2040, not far away, if no further action is taken. This is a research that has been published today. An estimated 171 trillion plastic particles were afloat in the oceans by 2019. This is, of course, extremely alarming for climate change, extremely alarming for the environment and extremely alarming for the world. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first, and that concerns women in Afghanistan, women in Islam and Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab, that has highlighted both while he was addressing the United Nations special meeting on women in Islam. More in the following report.
Throughout 2022, the ruling Taliban in Afghanistan introduced and enforced some of the worst gender-based discriminatory policies seen anywhere in the world. Millions of Afghan female students have been unable to attend secondary schools and universities for over a year following a ban by ruling Taliban. According to UNESCO, currently 80% of school-aged Afghan girls and young women, totaling 2.5 million people, are out of school. Since August 2021, the Taliban had issued more than 80 orders and decrees, many of which have tightened the group's grip on Afghan women, according to data compiled by United States Institute of Peace. In September, the Taliban replaced the Ministry of Women's Affairs with the Ministry of Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. United Nations has stated Afghanistan under the Taliban government is the most repressive country in the world for women's rights, with authorities effectively trapping women and girls in their homes. Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto has emphasized that Afghanistan's Taliban rulers have deeply disappointed Muslims across the globe by imposing restrictions on women's right to education and work. Addressing the first ever UN-backed conference on women in Islam, the foreign minister said that extremists have distorted the image of a religion that encouraged women to actively participate in all walks of life.
Dr. Tasawar Hussain, who's an expert in foreign affairs and also in international politics, joins us online. Not online, in the studios rather. I always mix the both of them. Dr. Tasawar, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Tasawar, as far as an estimate by UNESCO, 80% of Afghanistan girls are lacking education, and women as well. 2.5 million people are not being given the right to go to school or college to get their education. This decision to keep girls' schools shuttered, in my point of view, has reversed quite important gains that were made in female education in Afghanistan in the last 20 years. How, in your point of view, is this going to impact the future generations in Afghanistan?
Thank you very much, Omar. It's a pleasure to be here always. I would say that there comes a question in my mind whenever I hear about such news, that can a bird fly with one wing? And answer is
No, of course not.
So is the case of human society. So if a society aspires for progress, it needs to take into account both genders, male and female. And the point in question, that is the status of women in Afghanistan, of course, I would tend to agree with Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto that it is quite unfortunate, and it will add into the misery of Afghan society. It will not yield anything positive for the Afghan society as a whole.
But you know, Dr. Tasawar, if you look at the decrees that the Afghan interim Taliban government have put forward or implemented since they came into power in 2021, 80. This is a staggering amount, and all of these are centered towards women. Why target women? Why target girls? Is there a particular aim in their mind? Because if I look at our religion, Islam, it has never prohibited the women or the girls from getting education. In fact, it's quite the contrary.
Yeah, it's a very important question which you have raised. I think that their power base remains religion. Whatever they actually refer to, that is the religious discourse, but unfortunately that is very peculiar interpretation of religion which they actually bring forward all the time. So what I think is that there are multiple explanations which I would like to share with you and the audience.
Please.
The first one which comes into my mind is that they might be using it as a bargain chip just to engage international society otherwise, because international societies won't be engaging with the regime type like the type of Taliban.
But you know,
so
they would have engaged with the Taliban had the Taliban adhered to the conditionalities that had been put forward by the West, but they haven't, have they?
This is first of the competing interpretations that it might be a bargaining chip on their behalf.
All
that
right.
let's do this, and they will try to engage with us, and then things will move on and on. The second such explanation is what called as biopolitics. And the biopolitics is that there is a kind of society which is there in Afghanistan, and it is a very patriarchal society with complex interplay of tribal norms, values, traditions, and so on and so forth. So what we see over there is that a male gender is trying to control the body of women by referring to certain type of discourses, bringing from say smuggling from religion, or say from social norms, from tribal culture, from their values, so on and so forth. So this is second explanation which is called as biopolitics. And third one is that this is very peculiar with the whole global society, that there is inequality all over the world when it comes to gender parity. There is no parity.
That also Antonio Guterres very recently said that
Yes.
I'm looking at 300 years before there's actual gender parity in the world. But this said, there's gender parity, and then there is what is happening in Afghanistan. These are two, I would say what is happening in Afghanistan is an extreme altogether.
Yes, I would agree with you that it is a new level which they have just touched upon, and it is quite unfortunate. And the civil society, the intellectuals, I would say each and every individual has a role to play, at least in terms of saying that it is not acceptable. And this is what the international community is trying
But all those voices are being muted in Afghanistan who are trying to stand up to all of this. We've all seen how there have been certain processions in Afghanistan as well. There have been certain men, certain educators who have also even torn off their educational degrees and saying that they do not agree with what the Afghan Taliban is saying. This said, there's another development as far as, replacing the Ministry of Women's Affairs by the Ministry of Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. I mean, I really, as a layman, I fail to understand the logic behind it.
I think in order to fix this problem, we need to know how to engage with them. The society is very traditional, it is tribal, and the war has actually destroyed the very fabric of Afghan society. Now, they are into so many things, and perhaps they believe that religion is a glue.
But is this religion? What they are propagating as far as the women and the girls are concerned, not giving them access to education, not giving them access to jobs. All that I understand to some extent, if they are asking for parda, if they ask some kind of covering the heads or anything, but not going to this extreme. Can you accept that under any religion, including Islam? Islam has never stopped women from getting their due education.
Yes, I agree that Islam actually appreciates the spread of knowledge, enlightenment for all human beings. So the first verse in Quran says Ikra, means knowledge, search for knowledge, search for light. And there is Adi telling that all means both gender, male and female, they must be appreciated to search for knowledge, right? So primarily it is a duty of both male and female to search for knowledge, to search for light. Now, what we see in the form of Taliban regime, it is actually 13th century ideology, type of very peculiar interpretation, which is very I would say ultra conservative, and they have their peculiar type of interpretation of religion, which they want to impose by hook or by crook, and they are not ready to listen to anyone. But there is a thing. The thing is that they can't survive without international support.
Whose fault is it?
So many actors are involved, by the way, including Afghan nation, and they need to accept this fact that they actually gave them a space. They are equally responsible. See, there is no foreign country that would go somewhere in order to liberate them forever, for good. See, so they have to race against those occupants, those who actually deny their human rights, those who deny women rights. So this is the very responsibility of Afghan society as well. What we can do, we are actually foreigners for them. And by the way, now the overall picture of Pakistan in Afghanistan is not very positive, by the way. So what we can do is,
despite all that Pakistan has done for Afghanistan,
Pakistan has done so much for Afghanistan. There is no other country which has done that enough, which we have done for Afghanistan. The thing is that the process is not revolutionary, because we have witnessed that America has spent billions, not billions, maybe more than trillion on the war in Afghanistan and war in Iraq. And what was their very purpose? To bring some revolutionary change. Revolutionary change means that to topple down the regime, bring new one, then institution building, then democracy building, society building, so on and so forth, but it failed. What we have learned from it, the whole episode of Afghanistan war and Iraq war, is that we need to engage societies in an evolutionary manner rather than a revolutionary manner. Now, the revolutionary manner means toppling the regime and to install the new one, and that regime would bring some change, and it didn't work. Now, the thing is, the society is very traditional, it is centuries old, and they have their customs, they have their culture, they have their tradition, and they adhere to very conservative and unfortunately at times very distorted interpretation of faith or Islam.
But conservative interpretation aside, education has nothing to do with a conservative attitude, does it?
I think discourse is important, from where they actually fetch their power. Now, the mullah actually refers to God. Now, thing is that I can't actually make a call to God and asking him, hello God, how are you today, and please tell me that whether these rights are for men or for women, or all rights are there for men and women are deprived of all those rights. The thing is that the ideology is very dangerous thing. The faith, when it comes to ideology,
and
when
then
it
the
comes
interpretation,
to faith, and when it comes to its conservative, radical interpretation, that becomes their power base. And this is what the power base of Taliban is, religion. You cannot actually challenge faith, you cannot actually challenge ideology. And people actually died, but ideologies, they last. And this is what we are witnessing.
But
in
people might pass, ideologies might last, but how long is Afghanistan going to economically sustain itself in the current situation that it has put itself in?
I would say that their economy is not very well designed. It is not a modern economy. Their source of income are not very well registered. You know, they actually go for smuggling. They go for so many other things. You know, drug business, human trafficking, smuggling on borders. So their economy is very different from the modern economy. It's very different type of economy, and that's how they are surviving. Of course, we all have heard that dollars were smuggled from Pakistan to Afghanistan. You know, there are drug lords, there are warlords, and there are so many criminals, cartels which are working there. So that's something altogether novel when it comes to Afghanistan's economy.
You know, but that put aside, if you just go towards women's rights or girls' rights, basic rights, I'm not asking for them to liberate themselves like in the West, but at least give them their basic rights to education, their basic rights to earn a living under the conditionalities that they might put forward. I mean, that there could be a middle ground that could be agreed upon, but you cannot deny and just lock them under key and just say you cannot come out of your four walls of the house.
Yes, I believe that it is very, very unfortunate, and this is the highest form of patriarchy which we can see in Afghanistan. Now, they believe that we are the guardians of women, and we are there to control their bodies. We are there to take decisions for them, and it is as if they are not humans, and that is actually quite shameful.
That is wherein lies the dichotomy, that they do not consider them as human. I mean, this is a very important point that you put on. Now, the United Nations Women has estimated last year the restrictions of women have cost Afghanistan around $1 billion in losses, now which is around 5% of the country's GDP. In your point of view, what is the future of Afghanistan if it continues to marginalize women this way? Because if I remember well, in fact, this is what the media has said, the United Nations has said in the beginning of this very month, that there are going to be 8 cuts if Afghanistan continues with this policy towards women. Already, the United Nations is one of the very few organizations that continues to work in Afghanistan. What if it cuts its age as well?
Of course, the future of Afghanistan would be quite bleak, and there would be no hope for Afghan society if it continues and if it goes on and on. And I believe that the economy that is there at present in Afghanistan is actually based on charity stuff. So the UN is giving them food aid. There are certain other agencies, bodies which are on humanitarian grounds. They are actually trying to fill some gap. But this stopgap arrangement won't last forever, and they would compel to bring some positive change. I think that there are 2 ways. One is to force someone, that is coercion, and the military might actually, it hasn't worked in Afghanistan. The thing is that now this is also kind of use of force when it comes to sanctions, when it comes to economic debacle of a country, and they are unable to survive. Then you actually deal with them. You go for dialogue, and then third one is persuasion. And persuasion is a long-term process. You have your own rhetoric, they have their own rhetoric, you have your own narrative, they have their own narrative, and then you would be stuck somewhere. Because when someone is having radical ideology, it's very difficult to march on or to grab something positive, to get some extra mile. The thing is that there are 2 ways. One is short term, that is coercion, not military one, but through sanctions and then dealing. And the second one is in the long run persuasion, that is through some rhetoric, and that is to deal with them, to dialogue, to bring them to dialogue. It's evolutionary process, and for that we need more time.
But time for who is going to be the principal actor? Will it be the United Nations, which says, and I quote today in a report, that Afghanistan under the Taliban government is the most repressive country in the world for women's rights, with authorities effectively tapping women and girls in their homes. Now, this is today's statement. I also gave you the statement on the 9th of March that the United Nations said that it might cut aid if it continues with the policy. We know that half of the country's 38 million people are facing hunger. Nearly 4 million children are suffering from malnutrition. Does Afghanistan or the Afghan interim government understand the plight of its people, or do you feel the plight of its people does not compare to the ideology that the Afghan interim government has in its mind to implement?
I would say that quite unfortunately they would actually twist it, and they would twist it in a way that this is actually a test, from God's side. It's kind of test for all of us. God is testing us, and we need to stay patient. When you don't have any rational grounds to talk about, then you bring in God, you bring in ideology. So it's a kind of Allah ki taraf se imtihan. So this is coming from the God, so coming from the heaven. So this is not our fault. So you need to ask for forgiveness, and you need to you need to be good people. You need to obey us. You need to obey the religion. Then everything will be fine. Now this is in the short. This is something which won't work in the long run.
It might work for a year. It might work for 2 years, but they won't be able to sustain their people this manner, because we are already seeing women who are coming out and who are holding protests against this.
Yes, right now it is well recorded that the Afghan household is having very much difficulty in grabbing one meal on the table. So it's a very difficult time for Afghanistan. Taliban regime needs to understand it. They also need to, they also needs to cooperate with the international community, and they need to adhere to them, and they need to bring some positive change in their behavior, in their attitude. Unless they do so, there would be no change in Afghanistan, because ultimately they are there to take decisions. And the last thing which comes into my mind with regard to your question is that there is also a positive side of repression, by the way. When repression goes on and on and on, then human beings stand up, and they would stand up against their oppressors. And there might be something like this, some sort of indigenous sort of revolution, or people would rise against those Taliban, those who are actually.
Well, let's see what the coming days, weeks have. We've seen the warnings by the United Nations. We've also seen the efforts Pakistan is putting in order to make Afghanistan understand that this is not the way forward. I just hope that the OIC, that the United Nations, that other such organizations can somehow make Afghanistan understand that this is not the way forward. Thank you so very much, Dr. Tasawar Hussain, expert in international politics and foreign affairs, to have joined us, to have talked to us. It was wonderful to see you in the studios after a very long time.
Thank you.
Let's come to our second story, and that also concerns our Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab, who has stressed the need to establish a monitoring mechanism for crimes against women and girls in territories with foreign occupation that include illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir as well as Palestine. More in the following report.
The most egregious atrocities and crimes against humanity occur in situations of foreign occupation and suppression of right to self-determination to people. Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir has been under an unprecedented lockdown, military siege and communication blackout since August 2019, with the BJP government's revocation of Article 370, which took away Kashmir's special status as provided in the Indian constitution. In Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, the brutalities against hapless Kashmiris have reached such a level that even the world bodies and international communities are lamenting the plight of Kashmiris. The very existence of the Palestinian people in their homeland is being threatened and requires urgent action in line with international law as Israel continues carrying out crimes against humanity in Palestine. Every year, hundreds of attacks have been carried out by Israelis living in illegal settlements against Palestinians and their properties in the occupied West Bank. Addressing a high-level debate at UN Security Council in New York on women, peace and security towards the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325, the Foreign Minister called for holding the occupation forces accountable, demonstrating Pakistan's unwavering commitment to Kashmir and Palestine cause.
We hear the cries of mothers, sisters and daughters in Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, and Africa, suffering from the consequences of wars that were imposed on them. We have yet to implement the strategy to prevent wars, erase its suffering, establish accountability for the crimes against women and girls.
Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto highlighted violence in a situation of foreign occupation to suppress the civilian population, adding that this was manifested most vividly in the occupied Palestinian territories and in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir.
Now, of course, when it comes to the state of women, the situation in women, we've talked about the situation of women in Afghanistan, but how can we forget the state of women in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, in Palestine? The miseries and victimization of Kashmiri women in the hands of Indian troops, police and the forces in the illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is no hidden secret, although not much action is taken by the international bodies against it, but this is started to be highlighted on all the national and international media that are asking the world powers to take the necessary action. Naveed Aman Khan Saab, analyst, joins us in the studio to talk more about this. Naveed Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Naveed Saab, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab is making strides as far as the women folk across the world, especially in Muslim countries, are concerned, and also in non-Muslim countries. But this here, I would like to understand your point of view as far as those women who are under foreign occupation and are undergoing atrocities. Let's begin with Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. A report released by the research section of the Kashmir Media Service says thousands of women are among 96,181 people of the Indian held valley who have been martyred by Indian troops from January 89 to date. Then there are the rapes, then there are the harassments, then there are the incarcerations, the putting into jail, and then the half widows. You know, there are so many cases of women. Is there some kind of respite in sight? Do you see some kind of a solution in sight?
There should be a solution, but yet we are seeking for a very, very strong and stable solution for the Kashmir cause. Kashmir cause is very much now highlighted on international forum, and the international community now realizes that Kashmir is a burning issue, is a bone of contention between Pakistan and in India. Kashmir is an integral part of Pakistan and the jugular vein of Pakistan, as Qaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah categorically has announced during his during 1947-48. And but what we need to do to save those Kashmiri innocents from the brutality of the Indians and the Indian armed forces, we need to raise our voice on international forums. The media is here, and we need to strengthen this cause in the media to propagate positively for the liberation or for the indigenous movement of Kashmiris, and for the vote of their right of vote for the movement.
Right to plebiscite, right to self-determination.
What I would categorically say, in 2018 and 19, I was invited by the government of China. And I was the only Pakistani journalist who was invited by the government of China to participate in an international seminar being held in China. And on that occasion, two of the Indian journalists were also participating in that seminar. And one of the Indian journalists, Kadambini Sharma Bhangu from NDTV, she rose the issue of Kashmir on that platform. And she claimed that we have solved our matter of Kashmir amicably and against 370, and now we are going to take Pakistan occupied Kashmir. Then I rose myself, and I gave my counter thesis on Kashmir and countered her arguments. And she was of the argument that China should give some statement on that forum in favor of India regarding Kashmir. But it was myself who rose up and who argued and made null and void her argument and said that China has nothing to do with the Kashmir issue at this stage. This is a matter which is between Pakistan and India, which Pakistan will go for any forum in the world in favor of Kashmir and Kashmiris. And this is how all the journalists, the media houses, the think tanks, the politicians, the diplomats should come out and address the international community.
But Naveed Sahab, the fact remains that Pakistan's efforts in this regard are quite laudable, whether it be for the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and their cause for the right to self-determination or for the rights of the people in Palestine. The fact remains that there needs to be some kind of a mechanism in order to stop the crimes against those people who are subjected to occupational forces. Here I am trying to understand what kind of monitoring mechanism, as Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab has also pointed out, could be established for the crimes committed against the women and girls in such territories that are under foreign occupation. In your point of view, how can we establish a monitoring mechanism?
In fact, we need to mobilize the international community with Pakistan or at diplomatic level. And Pakistani Foreign Minister very positively, he is traveling a lot in different countries, making their perceptions clear about Kashmir issue and making the role of Indian armed forces, what they have been doing with the innocent Kashmiris. In Pakistan, political stability is very important. Unless we are stable in country and our economy is stable in the country, we cannot support diplomatically even the Kashmiris or the Kashmir cause. We need to strengthen ourselves, we need to put our...
So that our point of view can be accepted with a more
definitely with
aggressive...
a weightage.
All right. But Naveed Sahab, this said, I'd like to understand this whole monitoring mechanism. What you have said that more and more countries need to be involved in this. But do you feel the United Nations could somehow play an important role, because as far as in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is or its case is, we don't see much of intervention because India refuses the intervention, whether it be IIOJK or other institutions, to even go and monitor the actual situation in the Indian Hill Valley. When it comes to Palestine, we all know how the tables are turning as far as the Palestinian people and their plight are concerned. Who should we put our confidence into? Which organization should we put our confidence into?
In fact, United Nations should have done a lot for either for Kashmir or for Palestine. This forum has not been successful in giving justice to the Kashmiris and the Palestinians. Pakistan and the Muslim Ummah will have to mobilize UN and the Western world in this regard for the rights of the Palestinians and for the rights of the Kashmiris. Both the nations are struggling a lot. Kashmiris against the Indians, Palestinians against the Israelis. And the massacre on both of the places is unbearable. And both of the nations have sacrificed countless innocents. What we need to do, in fact, all the international forums, the African Union, the European Union, the Arab League, OIC, and UN, SCO, every forum, we need to knock every forum, and we need to put Kashmir and Palestine on the agenda.
But that is what we have done in the past years. This is what our current foreign minister continues to do as well.
I think we need to enhance our efforts, not only the Pakistan, but also the
other
entire
countries.
world, the entire world, the European worlds, the world, the countries which matter, like UK or US. So we'll have to, will be in the position to get peace for both of the nations if we go for such cause, lobbying, opting a very strong lobbying.
Naveed Sahab, the Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab was talking about the women and the crimes against them under occupation forces on the 25th anniversary of Resolution 1325 of the United Nations, which provides for a range of measures that are aimed at women's inclusion in preventing conflicts. He also says that the occupation forces need to be held accountable. Do you feel that can happen?
Can happen. And again, UN will have to play its role. The military observers should be deployed in Kashmir and in Pakistan. The fresh military observers should be deployed, though they are already there, but they are not effectively working for this cause. So unless the international forums, the international media travel across across India and in Palestine. We cannot have that much picture which actually is there. So to get that much picture, unless we get that picture, we will have to mobilize all these forums. The moment we find these pictures or this situation on merit, I think then the international media will be in the position to realize, to play its role for the solution of Kashmir and for the solution of Palestinian cause.
But you know, this situation of women who are the victims of crimes in places under occupation forces, it's not just restricted to in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and the state of Palestine, but I wanted to begin with this. There's also Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Africa,
elsewhere in the world,
who suffer from consequences of wars that are imposed on them. And here I'm quoting again our Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, when he says a strategy needs to be put into place to prevent war that was yet to be implemented. Do you feel that the major powers need to be more responsible in their attitude towards the women and towards all the victims of such conflicts?
Women are respectable in any part of the world and in any religion or belief. We cannot ignore women at all. Wherever women are victimized, no matter they are victimized in Kashmir or in Palestine or in any other part of the world, we need to stand for them, for the women, and unless we stand for in favor of the women, we cannot save them. So we'll have to stand for the women on different forums.
And how about the civilian population of those very regions that are under the occupation of forces, whether it be in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, whether it be Palestine? How important is their role as well? How important is their contribution towards resistance or resistance movements?
Unfortunately, in both of the places, in Kashmir and Palestine, the Indian armed forces and the Israeli armed forces, they are targeting the innocent civilian population, unarmed civilian population. But I would say I would pay homage to the Kashmiris and the Palestinians. Being unarmed, being very weak as far as the arms are concerned, but they are showing their fullest of resistance against most of the brutal forces. This shows how they are committed for their survival and for their security.
But what should be done? I mean, in your point of view, as an analyst, as a journalist, as somebody who understands politics and all this situation under the occupation forces and the brutalities on women, girls, but also on men, how can one give respite to the civilians who are under duress?
Though it is very difficult, but the governments of different countries will have to support Kashmir and Palestine, in particular for the sake of the women and the innocent children. Unless those strong countries, either the Muslim countries or from the European countries, they stand for the women, affected women or the victimized women or the children, they will be deserted and they will not be in a strong position to save themselves.
All right, Naveed sir, but this said, when you look at what happened in Palestine as well, 6 Palestinians were killed in the latest unit. We know all what happened in Huara as well. The violence that is perpetrated by the settlers as well as by the occupation forces have amounted to a staggering number this year, and also a very important number last year in Palestine. In India, illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir also, every single day we hear either some kind of brute force used on the youth or on women, or somebody who has been incarcerated, somebody who has been killed in some kind of an operation. This is a continued spate, but is there any end to this?
There should be an end to it, and there will be an end to it, inshallah. And what I see, the time when Indian armed forces attacked the Kashmiris, almost the same time the Israelis, they start attacking Palestine, because both of the issues are similar and go side by side. The more the Kashmiris will be weak, the more the Palestinians will be weak. So we need to extend our fullest support or moral support or diplomatic support to the Kashmiris. We need to extend our fullest of.
But that we are doing, Naveed sir, but I think much more needs to be done by other countries as well.
When I say we need to, I mean to say the entire world.
Exactly. All right. All right.
So, if entire world stands along with the innocent Palestinians, I think the issue will not be
will be resolved quite soon.
Yes, will be resolved very soon.
All right. Thank you so very much, Naveed, Aman, Khan Saab, Analyst, who have joined us to talk about occupation forces, women who are subjugated to these occupation forces and all the crimes that are committed on them. And that is what our Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab also highlighted on the 25th anniversary of Article 1325 of the United Nations. Let's come to our last two stories, ladies and gentlemen. The first story concerns a Saudi prince, Fahad bin Mansour Al Saud. He's formally launched the Saudi Tech House in Pakistan, and this is with the aim of creating more than 1,000 jobs, which has a total project value of $100 million US in the information technology sector over the next 5 years. This is extremely good news. This is what we wanted. We want more and more countries to come and invest in Pakistan. We've got vibrant sectors which need cooperation, collaboration with other governments, and that is what the Saudi Prince Fahad bin Mansour Al Saud is doing. There was an event for the launch that was organized by the Saudi Embassy in Islamabad. Prince Fahad bin Mansour, and I'd like to quote him because it's interesting. He said, "I believe with such a huge IT infrastructure, talent and startups in Pakistan, both the Saudi and the Pakistani private sectors can forge partnerships that can be game changer in the information technology sector." Let's hope so. We are waiting for that, and all the best for this new venture. Let's come to our last story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns environmental pollution. This is something that we in our show have been highlighting for quite some time, but of recent there is a report that says that plastics entering the world's oceans have surged by unprecedented amounts since the year 2005, and we are in 2023 now, could nearly triple by 2040 in about 7 years' time if no further action is taken. An estimated 171 trillion plastic particles have been afloat in the oceans by the year 2019, just 4 years back, according to a peer-reviewed research led by 5Gyres Institute, which is a US organization that campaigns to reduce plastic pollution. We all need to have this collective resolve also to reduce plastic pollution. We know of the legislation that was also put forward a couple of years back as far as reducing the impact of plastic in our capital city and other places in Pakistan is concerned. We need to be more responsible towards that. We need to recycle, or we need to dispose them in a proper way, not in such a manner that it impacts the oceans of our world, and indirectly it is going to impact the fish, other populations and us. It is a very vicious circle. It comes back to us in the long run. We need to be reminded of that and very careful with that. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new stories and segments that pertain to us here in Pakistan. Stay safe. Allah.